Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be finally wrapping up all of the books that I read in 2024. Now, I read 43 books out of 40 last year. I talked a little bit about this in my end of year book tag video, which I'll leave linked down below. But while 40 books or 43 books is definitely a decent amount, and by no means is that a small amount of books to read, I am still low-key a little bit disappointed in myself. I feel like I could have done a lot better. However, I did enjoy what I read for the most part, and I'm going to go through all of them with you, my ratings, and I'm going to try and be as concise as possible with my thoughts. So the first book I read for the year was Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber, and then throughout the year I read The Ballad of Never After and A Curse for True Love. And I really enjoyed this series overall. It just feels so magical and whimsical. The writing is really fun and easy to read, and I love the characters. I loved the world. I loved the magic of this story so much. I ended up rating the first two books 4 out of 5 stars each, and then I rated the third and final book 3 stars. It wasn't my favorite, but I still really enjoyed it overall. The next book I read last year is a behemoth of a book, and that is House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J Maas. This is the third and final book in the Crescent City trilogy, and I personally really love this. I know a lot of people didn't really enjoy where this story went, but I personally loved it. I rated this one 5 out of 5 stars. It's just, it's so hard for me to rate these books anything but, just because I enjoy them so much. I love the plots, I love the world, I love how everything kind of intertwines together as well, and there was a lot going on in this book, and I definitely understand why some people were disappointed by it, but personally I loved it. I loved every second. I thought it was so fun, and not fun, but like it just kept me hooked the entire time. Then I decided to continue on with my reread of the Throne of Glass series, which I intended to finish last year, but I just didn't, so I'm continuing this year. But I ended up reading Heir of Fire by Sarah J Maas, and then sometime later in the year I read Assassin's Blade as well. And I'm sorry, but like when I first read this book years and years ago, and every other time I've read it since, I haven't liked this book. This is, I would say it's still my least favorite of the entire series, but reading it this time around, I think I rated it like half a star higher than usual. So this time I rated it 3 out of 5 stars, which I know isn't a high rating, but the first time I read this, I think I rated it 2 or 2.5. Like, it was just not for me. And in saying that as well, this book still took me so long to read, just because I know that this is a more emotional journey, but I just don't vibe with this book the same way that a lot of others do. But I did feel like I got more out of that in this read. And in saying that, I also got a lot more out of Assassin's Blade this time around as well. The first time I read this was after Crown of Midnight, which is the publishing order it came out in, and that's why I read it in that order. And this time I decided to read it after Heir of Fire. So good. I'm so glad I decided to read this after, because I've started Queen of Shadows recently, and this one just hits different after Heir of Fire. Like, I really enjoyed this one a lot more as well. I gave this one a 4 out of 5 star rating. I enjoyed my reread of this so much more than I did the first couple of times around. So I think, like, overall my rereading experience of this series is going really well, honestly. Next I read Dear Dolly by Dolly Alderton. This is a collection of her columns, and I really got something out of this again. I rated this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. I just love Dolly Alderton's non-fiction so much. I need to read some of her normal fiction, but I feel like every time I've read her non-fiction works, at least, like, it's just been the perfect timing. Like, the stars have aligned, and it's just like listening to a really good friend casually. I just love her stuff so much. And I guess like you'd probably call this sort of like self-help, which is not my jam at all, but Dolly Alderton's writing just feels different. Even her columns feel so different. Then we have Bride by Ali Hazelwood. This is her first foray into paranormal romance, and I'm not gonna lie, this was different to any other romance that I've read before. I am not familiar with, I think they call it the Omegaverse. I'm not familiar with that at all. So a lot of the stuff that happened in here, while I imagine it was tame for people who are familiar with those stories, it kind of blew my mind a little bit, but I enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. I rated this one 4 out of 5 stars as well. Then I read If He Had Been With Me by Laura Nolan. I don't have this one anymore because I unhauled it because I really dislike this book. I think I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, but upon reflection it's probably closer to a 1 or a 1.5 star book. I cry at the drop of a hat, and this one did not make me cry. It didn't surprise me, and it just wasn't very well written. The characters annoyed me. I just really didn't enjoy my time reading this book, and I'm so sad because I was so excited for it. Then I ended up rereading Renegades by Marissa Meyer. I gave this one 5 out of 5 stars. I adored this as much as I loved it the first time reading, like 5 years ago in 2019. I just had so much fun revisiting this world and these characters. It really just takes you in it and it doesn't let you go. It is so much fun, and I loved every second. And I do have the rest of the series in here somewhere, which I'll talk about later. Then I have When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker. Oh my god, this is, I think, one of my favorite books that I've read this year. And last year, I rated this one 5 out of 5 stars. The writing was exquisite. The world was incredibly built. The characters were amazing. I just loved this world and this story so much. It was so beautiful, and I am so excited for the sequel. And this one was a little bit hard to get into. Like, I had to refer to the glossary a lot. However, in saying that, I didn't mind, and I don't think it took away from my enjoyment. I just adored everything about this book, honestly. Like, it was so well done and is one of my top reads of the year, easily. Speaking of top reads for the year, Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I also rated this one 5 out of 5 stars. I vlogged my reading experience with this book. It took me apart, destroyed me, put me back together, and it was just everything. I think this is one of, again, my top books of the year. I annotated it, I was highlighting it, I was sobbing so hard, I was laughing. This just gave me so many emotions, and I think about this book, I want to say at least, like, at one point it was daily. Now it's probably at least once a week that I just think about the characters in this book. And I thought it was just like gonna be a retelling of the movie Good Luck Chuck, because that's what it sounds like. It's about 2 people, Justin and Emma, who meet through Reddit because everyone they date ends up going on to meet the love of their life after they break up. And so they decide to date for fun, and then they fall in love and they go through this beautiful journey together, and I love it. I love this book so much. Then I decided to finally read Divine Rivals and Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. I really enjoyed these 2 books. I had heard so much hype about this series, or this duology, the previous year, and I ended up rating both of these 4 stars each. I think I went in with the wrong idea of these because this was heavily talked about as a fantasy romance. I wouldn't really call it that. It's kind of like more so a YA romance with fantasy elements, but it's not a fantasy romance. But regardless, writing beautiful, which doesn't surprise me because I've loved Rebecca Ross's writing before, and it's overall a really solid duology. I really liked it. Then after that, I decided to pick up a book that I had seen so much hype about all over BookTok, and I saw it in the store and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna give it a go. I've been burned by BookTok before, but I don't think it necessarily means that BookTok recommendations are bad, because there's plenty of good books that are talked about on BookTok. So I wanted to give it a chance, but this is maybe one of the worst books I've ever read in my life. How Does It Feel by Janine O'Reilly. This was 1 star easily. This is some of the most terrible writing I've ever read. The character, like the main character, was just so incredibly frustrating. The plot twist, like I guess one of the twists sort of got me, but like it wasn't that much of a big surprise. It was just so poorly written. I just didn't care. I also didn't care about the romance or the love interest introduced at one point as well, although this isn't really, I feel like this is the introduction to the romance, but it was just not well done, and the writing and the dialogue was some of the worst I've ever read. Then I ended up reading Powerful by Lauren Roberts. This is the 1.5, like the in-between novella between the first book Powerless and the second book Reckless. I enjoyed this way more than I anticipated. I wasn't a huge fan of the first book, but the ending made me want to continue the series still, despite giving it like a 2-star rating, I think. But this one I rated 3 stars. I feel like this was just so much better, and it just opened up so many more possibilities, and like there were so many more questions that I gained from this book, and it just made me so much more intrigued for the rest of the series. Next I read Wild Love by Elsie Silver. This is the first book in her Rose Hill series, and I've never read Elsie Silver before this book, and I'm not gonna lie, I was disappointed. This was still a solid 3-star read. It wasn't the worst book I've ever read, but it was also not one of like my favorite romances, or even, I would say, not even a good romance. Like the writing was fine, the characters were fine, the actual romance and relationship was fine. It was just kind of like mid the entire time. But that's okay. I'm still going to continue on with the series because I might enjoy the other couple more, and maybe this one just didn't gel with me that much. After that I read Funny Story by Emily Henry, and I just love Emily Henry books so much. This isn't my favorite Emily Henry book, but I rated this one 4 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed this a lot. I really loved Miles and Daphne so much. Miles as a love interest as well, he just felt so realistic. Like he wasn't like this like strapping like super handsome guy. Like he was kind of like dorky and funny and just like goofy, I guess kind of gross as well. I've seen a lot of people say that he was kind of gross, but also like I don't know, he just felt really real, and I really loved him. So I personally loved this book a lot. Then I ended up reading A Quart of Thorns and Roses and A Quart of Mist and Fury. I reread these with the graphic audiobooks. They are fantastic. I've read this series so many times by now, but for some reason apparently I didn't read the 3rd one in the series last year. If you are like me and have read this series over and over and over again, and you're looking for just like a new way to consume it because you want to reread it again, the graphic audios are amazing. Full cast of characters, sound effects, music, like the whole works. It is so well produced as well, and I really enjoyed my time reading these. I might actually, maybe I'll listen to Aquawar as well on the graphic audiobook version, because they're just like listening to movies, and I just enjoyed my time. After enjoying Just for the Summer so much, I decided to pick up Part of Your World and Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez as well. This whole series, obviously including Just for the Summer as well, it just means so much to me. Like they're just some of the best like romances I think I've ever read. I loved these books so much. This one I think I gave a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and this one was like a 4 out of 5 stars. And that's just because Just for the Summer is like solid, perfect 5-6 star read for me. So I couldn't rate these higher than that, but they are pretty on par with them. They're just like slightly lower. After that, I read one of my most anticipated reads for a couple of years, honestly, and that is Iris Kelly Doesn't Date by Ashley Herring Blake. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. Again, it was kind of mid. I was so excited for this because I love the first 2 in this series so much. They are interconnected standalone sapphic romances, and they are just so good, and I love the characters, and I was really excited for this one, but it did disappoint me. It wasn't my favorite. It wasn't her best writing as well, which was surprising considering it's the 3rd in the series. Then I decided to read The Housemade Secret by McFadden. This one is the 2nd in the Housemade series, and I think I rated this one 4 out of 5 stars. These ones are just so easy to consume. They are thrillers. They're really fast paced. The next book I read was one of the picks for the book club I was a part of last year at work, and that is Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt, and I rated this one 4 out of 5 stars as well. This is just a literary fiction. It's hard to describe because it is about an older lady who has lost her husband. Her son went missing like 20-30 years ago, and she works in an aquarium and she makes friends with an octopus, and then he helps her figure out the mystery of how her son went missing. And that is, I guess, the short and sweet version, but it is such a beautiful exploration of grief and growing older and like new relationships and friends and everything as well, and it was just a really beautiful story. Then I decided to pick up all of the Saga volumes, or volumes 1 to 5 at least. I reread them. I've been reading this one for a few years now. I'm still continuing it this year as well, but I've officially reread all of the ones that I had already read up until last year, and now I'm going to be continuing on from, you know, new ones that I haven't read yet. And it is a sci-fi graphic novel series. It's sort of like a star-crossed lovers situation. So Alana and Marco end up having a baby named Hazel. They're from warring planets and they're on the run. It is fantastic. Then I ended up reading The Surrate Mother by McFadden. This one is not a book that I own physically. I read it on Kindle. This one I rated 3 out of 5 stars. Again, McFadden is just so easy to consume and so easy to read and get through, so I ate this one up pretty quickly. After that, I decided to read another new release by Ali Hazelwood, and that was Not in Love. This one was a really different one for her as well. She's been experimenting a lot in the past few books. I've really enjoyed it. This one is the closest to an actual erotica novel that I've read, and I would say that this isn't your typical romance. Like, it is very lust heavy and very sex heavy, but I rated this one 5 out of 5 stars. I just loved how the characters talk to each other, how they got to know each other. There's sort of like a background plot happening as well with their workplaces. It was really sexy, honestly. Like, I loved this a lot more than I was expecting to, especially once I realized that it wasn't a typical like rom-com romance. But I thought it was really fantastic and some of her best writing yet. Sorry, I just had to change my camera battery. So after that, I was listening to the audiobook of this. And this is a book that has been on my TBR for so long now, and I'm glad I got it off. But that is Emotional Female by Yumiko Kodota. I ended up rating this one, I think, 3.5 out of 5 stars. This one is a memoir about Yumiko, who is Japanese Australian, and she becomes a doctor, and it really goes through the struggles of her becoming a doctor and how she wants to get into plastic surgery and the racism that she encounters, the sexism that she encounters. It was really fascinating to read about what it's like for a woman of colour in the Australian public health system, and how brutal it was for her in a lot of ways as well. Next, I ended up reading Daydream by Hannah Grace. This one I would say is probably my favorite of this series, and this is the same author who wrote Icebreaker, which I really enjoyed as well. Wildfire didn't love so much, but Daydream, I love this one so much. I rated this one 5 out of 5 stars. It follows Henry, who we saw glimpses of in the first 2 books, and he ends up meeting Hayley, and she's a bookworm and she's got so much on her plate. She's a chronic people pleaser, and Henry has a lot of struggles, and I believe the author mentions in her author's note as well that he is undiagnosed ADHD and or autism, I think, as well. And just reading about that and how that impacts his life as well, it was so good, and they're just so supportive of each other, and it was just really cute. And yeah, as you can tell, I'm getting all grinny just talking about this. I adored these characters. I love them. Okay, now we have Archenemies and Supernova by Marissa Meyer. So Archenemies is book 2 and was a reread for me, and Supernova is the 3rd and final book in the trilogy, and was my first time reading it. Oh my god, this whole series, 5 out of 5 stars. Like, it's so good, and the stuff that happens in Supernova, wild. I was not expecting it to end that way at all. Of course, it's YA, so you know, it is typical of YA in a lot of ways without spoiling anything, but I still enjoyed my time reading these books so much, and I'm so glad I finished the series. I adore this, and it holds up. It's so much fun. Then I decided to read a couple of shorter novellas, and the first one of those was The Butcher of the Forest by Premi Muhammad. This one is about a woman named Ferris, who is the only person in her village to have gone into the forest neighboring the village and come back out alive, as far as everybody knows. And then she's forced to go in there and help rescue the king's children, and it follows their journey, and it's very short and sweet, but there is so much jam-packed into this world. I would love a full novel just set in this world and this forest. It is so interesting, but for what it was really well done, really well written, and fantastic. After that, I read Small Things Like These by Claire Keegan. I have seen so many people talk about this book and absolutely hype it up. It won the Booker Prize, or was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2022. So like, I had pretty high expectations for this, and it did not disappoint. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was just such a well written, gorgeous little story. It is a very quiet story set in Ireland in a really tumultuous time, and it explores how, you know, institutions like the church, for example, and religion can be complicit in really awful things. And it also explores how everyday people can do kind of small gestures, if you will, or take what you would think is a small step, but it ends up making a huge impact on someone. And it explores the little heartfelt and impactful moments that someone can do in their life, and I just thought it was really beautiful. Like, I did end up highlighting some things in here as well, and it just made me feel very grateful for, again, like the little things in life as well, which is something I try and do anyway, but this one was definitely a good reminder. I just want to read out a passage I did end up highlighting. It says, before long he caught a hold of himself and concluded that nothing ever did happen again. To each was given days and chances which wouldn't come back around. And wasn't it sweet to be where you were, and let it remind you of the past for once, despite the upset, instead of always looking on into the mechanics of the days and the trouble ahead which might never come. I just think it's really beautiful. They are all of the physical books that I ended up reading, and then I didn't read a lot at the end of the year, but I ended up picking up The Situationship by Abby Jimenez. This one is very, very tiny. It was 37 pages long on my Kindle. I don't think I actually rated this one because I feel like it was almost too short to give a rating, and not enough happened for me to rate. It also wasn't a full story, so that one was weird. Then I read My December Darling by Lauren Asher. I originally rated this one 3 stars, but I bumped it down to a 2 just because this one is a Christmas romance and I love the cover. The cover is beautiful and so cute, but it was low-key, didn't feel very Christmassy. The characters I didn't really vibe with. The whole kind of romance in general I wasn't a huge fan of, which was disappointing because I really like Lauren Asher. Then I read Cruel Winter with You by Ali Hazelwood. This is another little Christmas romance novella. I gave this one 3 out of 5 stars. This one I did enjoy a lot more. I would say it's probably my favorite Christmas novella romance that I read this season. Then I read All by My Elf by Olivia Dade. I rated this one 1 star. That's right. This one was not good. It was bizarre, and I don't mind bizarre, but it wasn't bizarre in like a fun way. It was just really weird and not fleshed out, and I know it's like a short story, so I don't expect it to be fully fleshed out, but I did not like it. And then I read The Gift by Freida McFadden, and this one was like a short story thriller set at Christmas time. I ended up rating this one 3.5 out of 5 stars. I actually really enjoyed this, and it wasn't what I expected at all. If you've read Freida McFadden, it very obviously is a Freida McFadden book. Like, it reads the same, it has the same sort of plot going on without spoiling anything, but it was honestly really enjoyable. I really liked it. So that was my last read of the year. So they are all of the books that I ended up reading in 2024. So not my best reading year, but overall pretty solid. Honestly, I'm very happy with the books that I decided to reread and read for the first time. I discovered a new favorite author in Abby Jimenez, and it was just, yeah, it was overall good. I do wish I read more and prioritized reading more, but I did enjoy what I read. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a fantastic day or night wherever you are. I hope you had a happy and safe new year as well. And I'll see you all next time for a new video. Bye.